This isn't just a housing crisis. This is a ticking time bomb. And when it blows, it won't just wipe out property investors. It could bring the entire Australian economy down with it.
Authors of a new report into the rental market say Australia's housing crisis is the worst it's ever been.
1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, 7 tenants.
That's a garage.
That's a garage.
And how many people are living in that garage?
3 people live in there. 2 in one side and 1 in the other side.
Caroline, the number one cause that we have in this country is this massive unplanned migration intake that's been taking place since COVID. It has not been planned for, it hasn't had the consent of the community, and it also hasn't been targeted towards areas of economic need. So, we have a housing crisis because we've had this massive surge of demand coming from this massive migrant intake.
It's an inconvenient truth this Christmas. We are in the grip of a rental and homeless crisis, the likes we've never seen before in this, the lucky country. Too many people, not enough homes, creating misery and a sense of hopelessness.
The single biggest reason for the affordability crisis is that Australia hasn't been building enough homes to keep pace with its population increase. Record levels of immigration since borders reopened after COVID have laid bare the poor supply of housing. Pressures include overly complex and slow approval systems, a shortage of building materials and labour, and opposition to development by local residents, known as NIMBYism, which stands for Not in My Backyard.
In a sign of the times, a man is advertising on Facebook Marketplace single beds inside shipping containers for $200 a week on Queensland's Sunshine Coast.
Mum's begging for homes. Pensioners can't afford most rentals. Kids are sleeping in cars. Flood victims are living in tents. And to get a lease, you now need a renter's agent. Yup, things are so cooked, that's a real job now. Of course, if you don't like it, you can always piss off to the outback. Except you can't, because rents are skyrocketing there too. Welcome to the National Rental Crisis.
Chapter 1. A Nation Built on Real Estate. For years, property has been the golden goose of the Australian economy. Homes weren't just places to live, they were wealth machines. Buy now or miss out forever became the mantra. From Sydney to Melbourne, house prices surged by over 400% between the early 2000s and the late 2010s. The median house price in Sydney alone topped $1.3 million in 2023. While other countries diversified their economies, Australia became obsessed with real estate. It wasn't just homeowners driving the boom. Investors poured in, fueled by generous tax incentives like negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts. But beneath this frenzy, something darker was brewing. The foundations of a bubble so bloated it could snap the spine of the middle class. Property became a national obsession. Dinner table conversations shifted from footy and politics to suburbs and square meters. Ordinary Australians were being told they needed to get in the market or risk being permanently locked out. A generation of buyers was taught to view housing not as shelter, but as a leveraged path to financial salvation. The Australian government didn't just allow this bubble to form, it actively encouraged it. Policies like negative gearing, where investors could deduct property losses against their taxable income, made real estate more attractive than actual business ventures. Combine this with capital gains tax discounts, and you had an investor's paradise. Then came the stimulus spending. During the pandemic, programs like Home Builder injected billions into the housing market. Interest rates plummeted to record lows, making borrowing cheaper than ever. These actions turbocharged the market, but at what cost? The Reserve Bank, in hindsight, admits it kept rates too low for too long. Now those chickens are coming home to roost. Governments at all levels failed to create balanced policy. Instead of building affordable housing or investing in infrastructure to unlock new development corridors, they pandered to the investor class. Political donations from real estate interests poured in. Housing affordability became a talking point, not a priority. Chapter 2. The Interest Rate Trap. Between May 2022 and early 2024, the Reserve Bank of Australia raised interest rates from 0.1% to 4.35%. That's a more than 40-fold increase in less than 2 years. For a heavily indebted nation where the average mortgage is north of $600,000, this has been devastating. Mortgage repayments have doubled or even tripled for many. According to the ABS, over 1 in 3 borrowers are in some form of mortgage stress. Households are cutting back spending, slashing savings, and struggling to stay afloat. If rates rise further, or even stay this high for long, it could trigger a wave of defaults. That's how bubbles pop. Debt that once seemed manageable under low rates has become a crushing burden. Young families are skipping meals, missing holidays, and deferring medical care just to keep their mortgage repayments up to date. The RBA, caught between controlling inflation and avoiding recession, has few tools left that don't cause pain. Chapter 3. The Investor Domino Effect. Property investors, once the darlings of Australia's housing economy, are now under siege. Rising interest rates have eaten into rental profits. Meanwhile, new regulations in states like Queensland and Victoria are capping rent increases and pushing for more tenant protections. Some landlords are already exiting the market. Data from CoreLogic shows investor listings have spiked by over 25% in certain areas. Many bought at inflated prices and now find themselves underwater. When investors start dumping properties en masse, it sets off a chain reaction. Prices drop, more panic sell, and the bubble deflates rapidly. Investors chasing quick capital gains are now stuck with negative equity and tenants demanding repairs. The rental yield fantasy has turned into a bureaucratic nightmare, and with inflation biting, many are desperate to liquidate. Governments love to talk about helping first-time buyers, but in reality, these schemes often pour more fuel on the fire. Grants, stamp duty exemptions, and shared equity schemes increase demand without addressing the real issue, supply and affordability. The median income earner now needs 10 to 15 years just to save a 20% deposit in major cities. By the time they buy in, they're often saddled with 30-year mortgages at high interest. They're not building wealth. They're joining the next wave of financial casualties. For many first home buyers, the dream becomes a trap. They stretch themselves to the limit just to secure a loan. One interest rate hike, one job loss, one medical emergency, and they're on the edge. Chapter 4. Building Industry on the Brink. It's not just buyers who are suffering. The construction industry is in crisis. More than 2,000 building companies have collapsed since 2021. Fixed-price contracts became unsustainable due to rising material costs, labor shortages, and inflation. Builders can't make a profit. Projects stall midway. Clients are left without homes. Government oversight has been minimal at best, and cowboy operators continue to exploit loopholes. This supply-side chaos only worsens the housing problem. With fewer homes being completed and rising population growth, pressure on existing housing stock continues to rise. Many builders say they're hanging on by a thread. Subcontractors go unpaid, materials are delayed, insurers are walking away, and the backlog of incomplete homes leaves thousands in limbo, paying rent while owing mortgages on unbuilt shells. Chapter 5. Immigration surge meets no supply. Australia's migration program is back in full swing. Over 700,000 new migrants arrived in the 2022 to 2023 period alone. While migration is essential for long-term growth, the timing couldn't be worse. These new arrivals are competing for the same rental and housing stock that's already at crisis point. Rents in Sydney rose by 24% in 1 year. Vacancy rates are below 1% in many areas. This isn't just a squeeze, it's a chokehold. And yet planning approvals have plummeted. According to the Housing Industry Association, new home starts are down by over 40% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Without adequate infrastructure or housing policy, the immigration surge has unintentionally intensified the affordability crisis. It's not the migrants' fault. They're entering a broken system. But the system wasn't ready, and now everyone's paying the price. Chapter 6. Household Debt. A Nation Addicted to Credit. Australia has one of the highest levels of household debt in the developed world. As of 2024, household debt stands at 190% of disposable income. This is largely driven by mortgages. When interest rates were low, this didn't seem like a problem. But now, it's a disaster waiting to happen. People have over-leveraged based on artificial pricing. A 10% correction in home prices could wipe out the equity of millions. A 20% correction could spark panic. Remember, house prices don't have to collapse all at once. They just need to stop rising for the system to start breaking. This debt culture was normalized by decades of rising home values and easy credit. But that illusion is cracking. As repayments surge, household spending shrinks, and with it, the broader economy. With home ownership becoming a fantasy, more Australians are renting. But the rental market is in crisis too. Weekly rents have hit record highs, especially in major cities. Essential workers, nurses, teachers, tradies are being pushed to the fringes or into homelessness. Rental assistance hasn't kept pace, incomes haven't kept pace. And with many landlords selling, the available rental stock is shrinking. This leaves tenants with fewer options, rising costs, and decreasing stability. Some renters are now competing with 50 other applicants for a single property. Others are sleeping in cars, couch surfing, or living in unsafe accommodation. It's a humanitarian issue, happening in one of the world's wealthiest nations. Chapter 7. Could the government actually let it fall? Here's the billion-dollar question. Would the government really let the housing market crash? The answer might surprise you. While politicians talk a big game about affordability, they know that a housing collapse could sink the banks, wipe out retirement savings, and tank consumer confidence. So, the system is propped up with more band-aids, rate freezes, grants, investor incentives. But all this does is inflate the bubble further. Australia's housing market is like a plane running on fumes, gliding on momentum and denial. But gravity always wins. The political cost of inaction is growing. Voters are fed up. Young Australians see no path to ownership. Renters are organizing. The question is not whether the collapse will be allowed, it's whether it can be avoided at all. Let's not sugarcoat it. If this bubble bursts, the fallout could be catastrophic. Property prices could drop by 20 to 40% in key markets. Major banks could face liquidity crises due to defaulting loans. Construction job losses could skyrocket. Renters and owners alike could face homelessness. Consumer spending would collapse, plunging the country into recession. We've seen this before, 2008 in the US, 1990s in Japan, and more recently in China's property crisis. Australia isn't immune. Super funds invested in property trusts could be hit. State budgets reliant on stamp duty would shrink. Insurance claims would rise. The ripple effects would touch every corner of Australian life. Chapter 8. Can Australia be saved from itself? The road back starts with honesty. Acknowledge that the market is broken, that current policies have failed, and that radical reform is needed. Here's what experts are calling for. End negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts. Massively invest in public and affordable housing. Introduce rent caps and tenant protections. Regulate building standards to prevent industry collapse. Diversify the economy away from real estate dependence. These aren't easy fixes. But without bold action, the collapse will be far worse. Real change means challenging powerful interests. It means enduring short-term pain for long-term stability. But unless Australia chooses reform, the market will force it upon us. Final thoughts. The clock is ticking. Australia's housing bubble is not just unsustainable, it's actively harming the future of a generation. From renters being priced out to young families crushed by debt, the dream of a fair go is slipping away. We can act now or wait until it's too late. To watch the latest update on Australia's economy and housing crisis, click this video here.